I want to give a shout out to the KC Clay Guild for sponsoring this episode of the podcast. Also want to encourage everyone to apply for their annual T-Bowl National, which will be juried this year by Erica Iman. This is always a great show with pieces ranging from tea bowls for the Japanese tea ceremony to sculptural interpretations of that iconic drinking vessel. This year's exhibition will have a $500 Best in Show, as well as other prizes including purchase and equipment awards. Apply before their June 25th deadline at kcclayguild.org/apply. Hey, Red Clay Rambler fans, we just passed the 9th birthday of the show, so to help celebrate that, I'm asking you to contribute $9 to support our new season. You can get involved by making a donation through the PayPal portal at talesofredclayrambler.com/donate, or you can make a monthly pledge at patreon.com/redclayrambler. If you join Patreon today, you can access perks like t-shirts, water bottles, and other podcast swag, as well as having access to the Patreon-exclusive Tales from the Vault podcast, which features remastered episodes that are no longer available on major podcast apps. Thanks for listening and being a part of this Red Clay Rambler community. With your support, I can keep the show rolling into its new 10th season. So thanks again, and let's get on with the show. Welcome to the Tales of a Red Clay Rambler podcast, featuring interviews with culture makers from around the world. This is Ben Carter. I'm going to be your host. If you'd like more information on the show, please visit our website, talesofaredclayrambler.com. Welcome back to episode 372 of the podcast. Thank you guys for tuning in, and as you heard, this is the start of our 10th season of the show. As always, thanks for joining us. If this is your first show, welcome to the podcast, and if you've been there for all of our previous 9 seasons, I want to send a special thank you to you. I couldn't make this show without the support and the listenership of folks like you. On today's episode, I talk with Adrienne Eliades. She is a potter that's based in Vancouver, Washington, where she makes work that has been influenced by mid-century modern patterns and aesthetics. In our interview, we talk about developing confidence as a teacher and how she has developed the intricate surfaces of her work using a die-cut stencil. If you'd like to see examples of her work, you can go to adrienneeliades.com. Without further ado, we'll get to the interview. Well, let's start talking about that, if you're okay with it. If we start talking about your experience teaching online. You had mentioned before we started recording this that you've had some times in which things went really well on Zoom, and then you've had some times where things didn't go well. So can you talk about learning to be flexible as a teacher when you're using a digital interface?
Sure. Technology and I are frenemies. So I was really apprehensive in teaching online, but with the pandemic and so many of my opportunities being on permanent hiatus, it was what it was. I just had to be flexible and pivot. And so luckily I did have my husband who had been teaching webinars and gave me some guidance on how to use Zoom and, maybe pre-recording some videos to kind of take the pressure off and making it more dynamic with an asynchronous kind of learning style in there, as well as the live discussion and demo and lecture and stuff like that. But there's just like a disconnect between teaching online and teaching in person. I don't think my wit and my charm come across in quite the same way when you have me in a room, and that connection that you feel with people in a small group versus like having 30 plus people on the other end that are just watching you like a TV. So that's something that I still struggle with, and I'm still trying to figure out how to make that better and a more positive experience, because it really is it's like a sampling course. People are taking all these different workshops, which is great. The accessibility is wonderful. Like, I have people from Norway, from Australia, people that would never take my workshops because they just wouldn't come here to do that, or that it just wouldn't line up. But it's also just really nerve-wracking having all these people watching you. And I was such a shy kid. I was never one to answer questions in class. Like, I think about it sometimes. I can't even believe that I present in front of 400 people at NCECA, let alone 10 people at a workshop. That I can get up and talk in front of people still really amazes me. And it's all about practice. So I still get that nervous, jittery feeling every time I, press the Zoom meeting open button and kind of have to flow into it for a few minutes. If I practice and prepare, that's better. And I've also been trying to experiment with like class size. And even though it's really a great thought to make thousands of dollars by letting 80 people into a Zoom workshop, it's not the experience that I want to give. And I don't think it's actually as good or as positive of an experience for them, because there's like limited interaction when they can't ask questions because there's too many people on it, or when they only have to use the chat feature and they can't, turn their mic on and talk. So I've been, maxing it out around 30, 35 people. And not everybody can even make it to the class. They watch the recording. So that kind of helps keep the number down. And I've found that doing things like that, like actually making it more like it would be an in-person art class, is positive both for me and my anxiety, but also for the student experience. And, I think that it's never going to replace in-person workshops. We're seeing that already. They're already coming back, which I'm thrilled about, because I really do miss like having that engagement and that interaction in a longer format. But it's almost like it's a promo or like an audition. Someone gets interested in your work or one aspect of your work, and then they start collecting you, or they take a week-long workshop, or they have an access point into you and your work and your art that maybe didn't exist before the pandemic. So it's been the silver lining for me that I still have a way to reach students and a new platform, and something that I'll take into the future too. I don't plan on stopping teaching them. I don't know if I'll do as many, like especially this summer, I'm doing a few in-person workshops and I'll start traveling again. So I just won't be here to actually teach them. It'll be certain times of the year probably. But I think it's just a really good kind of thing that's come out of all of this chaos and mess that we've had to deal with the last year. So it makes me happy to see smiling faces that are interested and engaged, even if it's just through my computer.
Well, I want to go back to something you said about that you are a shy kid and that you really had to learn how to teach, how to have the confidence to speak up and say, like, I know this. But we both went to the same master's program, University of Florida, where teaching you how to teach is a core part of the program. In fact, when I was looking at grad schools, that was one of the things I was looking at, is I wanted to go to a teacher's school. So can you talk about the process of learning confidence in the classroom and also the actual technique of teaching that you practice?
Yeah, so that was the same for me. That was something really attractive about Florida, that they did have a class that taught you how to teach, because it was something I thought that I really wanted to do. I mean, at the time, I thought I wanted to be a college professor. I've since learned that I do not want to do that. And I think that, just through getting deeper into my own art practice, I figured out that I want to spend my creative energies a little more in my own studio than with my students and the bureaucracy of teaching at college, but I do appreciate having that education and not only having a class, with a actual like education professor, not an art professor that taught us all these different things, but then having 2.5 years to practice it because we were the instructor of record and you were the only one in the room. And I found that when I don't have a crutch to lean on, if I was like a TA, it's like, oh, I'll let the professor, I'll let them handle that. I'll just stay quiet. But when there's no one else in the room, you can't just stay quiet, right? You have to speak up. You have to take charge. And that's something that I have a really big issue with. I think it's just imposter syndrome a little bit. And then also, people would come into my class when I was teaching in grad school and ask for the professor or the teacher. Like I just look like a student and did then, definitely, maybe still do. That's happened to me a few times, like even in recent years, like at PCC or places I've taught, people come in and they ask where the teacher is, I'm like, oh, that's me. Hi, can I help you? So maybe that's a good thing or it's a bad thing. I don't really know, but it's just something that it's just practice, like anything in life, you just throw yourself into it. And something that is like a big core value of mine is I like to make myself uncomfortable. I get really bored if I don't. So I move a lot. I change jobs a lot. I take on new opportunities. I say yes to things that make me feel like I'm going to vomit or like I just don't like have any skills in that. And teaching was definitely one of those things. It was just another thing. And I was like, well, if I really want to do this, I'm going to have to try to do it. And if I fail, that's a hard thing for me. I don't like to fail. I'm a perfectionist, and something that I couldn't wrap my mind around so much back then, but I see more value in it now is like the undergrads at UF. For the first 2 years, they're basically being taught by graduate or PhD candidates, right? That's their education. And that was like a really overwhelming feeling to me. Like, I didn't know what I was doing. How could I possibly be teaching them what to do? But then I learned just through doing it that I do know more than I think I know. And Florida really does give you the tools, right? They didn't just put you in a room and tell you to teach. They gave you syllabi from past grad students. There was a professor or a senior member of the staff overseeing you. You had people you could go to. It wasn't just like being on your own. So it was kind of this like, yes, you are there and you're the one that's responsible, but you had this like network of people that would support you. And that was something that was just really fabulous about Florida in general, and something that attracted me to that program. It's got this amazing network of artists that have come out of there, especially in ceramics. And, like, it sounds kind of corny, but like we all keep in touch. We're a family, like, and we all try to lift each other up. We don't try to compete or, push each other down. So just feeling like I had that support gave me the confidence, I think. And then over time, as I practiced more, and knew what I was talking about more and was teaching techniques that I actually used in my work and had come up with or pieced together from other things I had seen, then it was like, yeah, I am the expert on this. Like I should have the confidence to teach this, and people should think that I'm, an authority. So I still have trouble with it all the time. Still makes me super uncomfortable, but you just got to do it. Otherwise, if you never try, you'll never know.
I like what you said about, do you get bored? So you need to give yourself these sort of anxiety producing experiences. I relate to that a lot. I for years thought I was an anxious person, but then I realized that I was a person that took tremendous risks because I thought that's what the career of being an artist was. And since the pandemic, I've taken less risk because I've been home more, less teaching, less everything really. And my anxiety level has gone down so much that now I'm questioning like, do I need to go back to this system of like push, or what do I do?
Yeah. No, it's like you're in my brain right now. I've never considered myself an anxious person. And I think in a lot of ways, career related anxiety is like a zero lately. And I've just never been a person not to try. And the pandemic is making me like think like, oh, I could maybe just sell things online and never leave my house and not be accountable to anything. And I mean, that's definitely a life, that's definitely a track for an artist, but it's lonely, in a lot of ways. And when I don't put myself in those situations that make me pretty anxious or uncomfortable, I also don't grow at all. And that's problematic to me because I want to keep growing. I don't want to keep making the same work, and making work is really just one piece of my practice, in my opinion. And sometimes it's not even my favorite piece. I really like teaching. I like inspiring people. I like that engagement and that connection and feeling like I'm creating like a network of people too that get excited from something that they learn from me. I think that's way more fulfilling than anything I could actually make into a physical object. So, I am trying to strike some balance though, because I think the way I was working before the pandemic was like completely unsustainable. I was working like 14 hours a day. I would say yes to everything, whether I wanted to do it or not. Just feeling like I'm an emerging artist. I'm like in the beginning of my career and I just really had to prove myself and hit the ground running, And so the pandemic has definitely given me perspective of like, I can say no to things. I can enjoy quiet nights at home with my dog and my husband and not feel guilty about not rewriting my artist statement or applying for a grant. It's important to be a person too, not just everything that you're putting out into the world. And, maybe if I'm a more balanced and well-rested person, I'll actually end up making better art in the long run. Who knows? Because I won't burn out. So it's all these ideas are like floating around in my head. And it's hard now because things are starting to come back, like just yesterday, I got an email from PCC asking me if I want to teach classes again. And it's like, I don't, do I really want to keep doing that? Or was it good for that time in my life? And now I need to progress past that, or I need to really see that I'm just kind of spinning my wheels there and it's not actually like making me grow or do anything new. So yeah, it's just really challenging to know, and all the fear and anxiety that the pandemic has produced is like a whole different thing. But I am trying to take some of these like really hard life lessons that I've learned over the past year and not just ignore them and go back to the status quo of what was before, just because it's becoming available again. And like, I'm never going to be like the top ceramic artist. That's not my goal. I just want to live a life that is full and rich and hopefully inspires some people to want to get their hands dirty. And maybe that's enough for me. Maybe I don't need to be applying to every grant and every award and every residency. And I think that, I'll be more comfortable in my life if I say no to things and just know that, I don't need to do all that anymore. But I should keep trying. I'm not just going to like lay down and die at the same time.
Well, I think it's about judging the internal, what I think of as like the internal regulation of emotion for me. Like I need some risk. If I don't take any risk, I feel like I'm not, like I disappear in some way.
Yeah.
So
no.
like for years I did that in the studio. Sometimes it was like athletic or, rock climbing, like some sport type thing. So I think there's some balance. I don't want to, I like you too. I don't want to get rid of all that, but I don't want my wife to look at me every couple months and be like, you need a break. Cause I was not great at being able to tell when I was at burnout, but she could always tell. And she'd be like, you're getting weird.
Yeah, no, I have the same thing with my husband, Nate. And also, there's this weird indicator that I've noticed too. I don't eat beef. And when I'm in true burnout mode, I'll like go get a beef taco, which is weird. And it's happened like a few times in the last couple of years. Or I'll just order something and not ask and then realize I'm eating beef. And I'm like, oh, like I've hit that plateau. I've hit that level of like, I'm so tired. I don't even know what I'm doing anymore. I don't even know what my values are anymore. So yeah, and I've gotten there a few times in the past couple years, so it's I do want to keep taking risks though. I want that for my life. It's just like, what are the important risks and how do you identify those and follow up on those? That's something that's just really challenging when you're piecing together a creative career. There's no playbook. I mean, you can talk to 50 different artists and they've cobbled their careers together in 50 different ways. They have certain things that give them their bread and butter money every month. They have things that really fulfill their conceptual will for making. And they're not necessarily the same things. So I'm a work in progress, I think. And hopefully I always will be, because if I have all my answers, I'm probably going to get bored and then I'll just like want to stop it all together,
Yeah. Then you'll take a job doing something totally different.
Yeah. I mean, I was a secretary all through like high school at my mom's real estate company. I know what that's like. I know I'm good at it. I know I can do it. Doesn't mean I should do it.
I had read an article, I actually can't remember where it was, but it was talking about how your work pivoted from Soda Fire into Cone 6, more decorated work. And it was actually a pivot that happened based on building a kiln. So can you talk about or tell that experience of building a kiln and how long that took and how that led to a change?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think every big monumental change in my life has really been sparked by some sort of catastrophe or needing to fix something. I wish I could say it was like internal and I knew what I needed to do, but that's just never the case. So I had been like a volunteer tech or artist in residence, post-bac, whatever you want to call it, at San Diego State University for about 2.5 years before I entered grad school. And that's a really fantastic program. It gives you just space and you help, with like inventory and loading kilns and doing kind of all the studio maintenance behind the scene work. And Richard Burkett and Joanne Hayakawa were the professors there at the time, and they were amazing people to work with and mentors. So Richard Burkett, he soda fires, and I had been soda firing in North Carolina where I did undergrad and fell in love with that process. Probably because, like a lot of people, I hated glazing. And so soda firing finishes the outside of the wares for you. I'd even done some salt firing and stuff. And then especially working with someone like Richard, who's just a chemistry genius and knows clay and glaze technology so well, and, had these amazing resources of this big soda kiln that I didn't have to fill by myself. And there was a community around it there. Which now looking back, it's like more than the objects I was making, it was the community that was really exciting. So fast forward, I get into Florida, and yes, they have all of those kilns, but they didn't have a community of people interested in it there, at least not when I was there. And the soda kilns were both kind of in bad repair. They were really well loved and used in the Matt Long days, and then kind of sat there and no one really did much with them. And so I was very idealistic and I was like, I got this. I can make this kiln work. I could not get those kilns to fire to temperature, regardless of what I did. And I'd be there at 4 a.m. by myself, like cross-eyed, trying to figure out how to make it work, thinking that I knew what I was doing, and it just wasn't happening. So finally did some research, talked to people, and found out, the kilns, there was 2 kilns. There was a big one and a small one. They shared a chimney. It was letting in a lot of air. So the design was kind of flawed. And then the big one was it just needed rebuilding. So I, pushed this proposal together and convinced the school to give me funds to rebuild it. And I was really proud of myself for that. I was like, wow, people are actually listening to me and, giving me money and investing in me. And I'm the only one that's using this thing. But kiln building is a very long process. And I had only really built kilns in like big groups or had been there for part of it. Richard took me to San Jose State as an assistant, and that he built a kiln for them and like a kiln building workshop. And, that was such a fantastic experience. And not to say anything bad about building the kiln at Florida, but it was really nothing like that because it was just me and the teaching lab tech, Derek Reverts, that were doing everything. And he also was doing his full-time job. It was just like an independent study. So we got the proposal, we got the funding, we got the materials, but then it just took way longer than we thought. We thought we were going to knock it out in the summer, and it took almost a full year. And we eventually involved more grad students and people that just wanted to learn and pitch in and, lend a helping hand. It was a fabulous learning experience, but it took forever. And by the time we were done, I had a full year of grad school where I had to make work. It's not like I could just hit the pause button because the kiln wasn't functioning. I still had classes. I still had to be accountable to them, and I still had to produce objects. I was in a ceramic grad program. So I went to cone 10 reduction firing, and it just wasn't giving me the results I wanted. I wanted more color in my work and pattern and just things that I was excited about in other art forms and mediums that I saw. And so I did this really fabulous independent study with Linda Arbuckle, where she just gave me permission to work on tiles for a whole semester and just, play around with color and underglaze and glaze and pattern and stencils and all this stuff that I really hadn't done before. It was so foreign to me to try to put any kind of imagery on my work. And I fell in love with it. And then the kiln was done, and I was like, I have no interest in using this kiln anymore. And I felt so guilty that I made the school investment. I mean, ultimately they get a nice new rebuilt soda kiln, so I shouldn't have felt guilty, but and we fired it with a bunch of student work. It's not like it just sat there and we didn't, ever use it, but I never went back, and I've fired a few soda kilns here and there. When I'm in communities of people that like want to do it and want to gather, because like I said, that is what was exciting to me. It was the process of like loading it together and, firing and taking shifts and spraying the soda in together and getting everything out and seeing people's reactions and having help cleaning up all the wads and sanding and, all the soda off of the furniture and all that stuff that takes so much time. So between that and just asking myself some very real questions about what my life was going to look like after grad school, when I didn't have all this institutional support, I'm not a rural girl. Like, I don't want to live out in the country. I hate it there. I mean, it's good for a weekend or whatever, but like, that's not my life. I've always lived close-ish to a city. So, as far as like building my own soda kiln and having that like romantic idea of this like isolated maker, like I wanted nothing to do with that. So I was like, wow, I should probably like make fast friends with an electric kiln so that I can live in a city and have some semblance of the life that I want to lead and still be able to make work in a way that's meaningful to me. So it was, a broken kiln that really sparked a whole revolution in my art making. And now I don't know that it could have happened any other way. And I'm very grateful that that kiln was in such disarray when I got there. And also just for the experience of building a full kiln with just one other person by myself, that was really valuable and taught me a lot.
When you have a professor, or in this case, Matt was teaching and was the technical assistant, the students kind of follow that example, so that pace of work, like when I was there as a post-bac, we worked very quickly to fill the kiln. But then when you have an electric kiln, or in the case of Florida, like, 15 electric kilns to fire, the pace of progress is different. So can you talk about how you taught yourself how to set different benchmarks, not to fill a kiln, but more to accomplish an idea?
Yeah, I mean that was a huge thing that changed when I switched how I fire. And also, going from programs that were more utilitarian kind of, I mean, not that Richard's work is super utilitarian, but just kind of this like idea of like production work. He makes work so quickly. I had been in North Carolina at a undergrad program where, Aaron Wilcox, who was the professor, makes really beautiful pots, but they're simple, they're elegant, and he makes them fast too. And then coming to a place like Florida, where you have Linda, who just decorates these beautiful Maiolica pieces, and it takes her a while. And you have someone like Nan that's building these giant sculptures that, takes her months and months. So that slowing down was definitely something environmentally that was being pressed upon me. Like, I worked for a production potter in North Carolina after undergrad and quickly realized that I did not want to be a production potter. Like, I had no interest in making 100 things a day and then trimming 100 things the next day. That family was really interesting. The Jeffcoats, it was a family. It was a mother and father and their kids, and they all worked in the business, and they actually used to be bankers. So they were really financially savvy too. It was a really positive experience working for them because they were just like a powerhouse. Like, that pottery made hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. And I don't think most potteries do that. So it was interesting, but it was also like, why do I need to make so many things? Or do I need to make so many things? I'm not a machine. I'm not IKEA. So all of those experiences I had up until that point, and then going into a program where I saw people making this more slow, thoughtful work, it was like, yeah, I could definitely do this. I don't need to fill the kiln every time I fire, especially at Florida, because no one's checking on you like that. Because it's more about executing your ideas than it is maxing out capacity or whatever. So it really did give me the permission to slow down, to figure out what I was making, why I was making it, why these things even needed to exist in the world. Because so many people make pots, and I think until grad school, mine were pretty faceless, if that makes sense. Like, it didn't say anything about me. It said everything about who I was working for, or where I was, what I was researching. It didn't really have my voice in them. So just slowing down gave me that opportunity to really figure out what I wanted to make, how I wanted to make it, how I wanted to look, what context I wanted to put it in. And then now I make work like as slow as humanly possible. I don't think I could work any slower if I tried. And then when I have a new idea, it just slows down the process even more. Like, now I put glaze patterns on top of my underglaze patterns. And I swear it takes me 8 hours to make a mug sometimes. And that's fine, especially because I have other income streams. If I was just making and selling work, I'd be in trouble, like big trouble. Because it takes way too long, and I definitely am not getting definitely not paying myself to work, I suppose. But yeah, I want to put good objects out into the world. I don't need the quantity to be the most important thing. That's just not where I've ended up. So if I make 20 mugs in a month, that's fine with me.
So I wanted to talk about your aesthetic, but I kind of want to work backwards. And you mentioned that you made pots for a long time that were faceless, that didn't have enough of you in them. There was something of you in them, but not enough of you. So let's work backwards. What do you think your pots say about you? And then we'll work backwards into what they actually look like.
I think my pots are very similar to my personality these days. They're fun and playful because they have, a lot of shape and color to them, a lot of interest. but they're also really ordered and structured when you look at them. They're very tight. I'm pretty type A, so I think that comes through. And I am a perfectionist, and I'm trying to work that out of my character quickly.
Good luck.
Yeah, it's not happening. But, perfection is boring, and I know that. And so when you have this perfect pattern on a mug, you see it and you understand it, and then you don't have to look at it again, right? When it's repeating and it's doing the exact same thing all the way around. So because I use stencils, I put them off register on purpose. I let those lines show through. I actually highlight them. And I think it's just this really kind of lovely metaphor for like, yeah, I try to be perfect, but I am so not perfect. Like I am so far from perfect. It's not even funny. So I'm letting my cracks show, and I think the work kind of visualizes that really well.
So I feel like when people start decorating, or I should say for myself, when I started decorating, I was moving from wood and soda, much like you, into doing pattern work. And there was a couple years where everything was tight because I didn't know any other way to do it. Like tight was a default because it is also my personality to be controlled and, kind of restrained in a way. Mm-hmm. But I slowly realized that there are different types of tight. So say, for instance, Ron Meyer's pots are very organized. Like structurally, they are so organized, but no one would ever say they were tight because of the way he is touching the clay, the way he decorates, all of that. So can you talk about how to make tight pots interesting and how you've learned which parts of the process can you relax and be okay with it?
It's a really good question. Yeah. And I would agree with you. No one would ever say that about his work, because it's so loose and gestural, but he's so masterful at it. So that's something that I value in other people's work, whether it's a loose aesthetic or a tight aesthetic. And I've always been fascinated with being kind of like an illusionist potter. Like you have this object and it's not immediately available to how it was made, right? And for a long time, I was making things that functioned really well, but didn't look really great. So that kind of striking that balance between form and function is really important to me. Like I want the object to look and feel and work as good as it looks, So that's hard. It's really hard. And it's a lot to think about. And it's something that over time I've just developed kind of rules for myself. Like, it's easier to decorate like a straight up and down cylindrical form. And something's got to give, right? When you're doing a lot of surface decoration on form, if the form's really dynamic and then you're putting a really dynamic surface, they're going to compete. So something's got to give, right? So for me, it was like realizing that like these big bellied pots or things that had all this curvilinear form language to them just weren't going to be what was best to put surface on, at least for me. So my forms got a little more simple. And then the decoration could really shine through. But, remembering that you can put embellishments on it, like a handle can be very sculptural and function really well and feel really good. And then how do you do that so that you don't go crazy and you're not spending like 4 hours on a handle? And the answer was slip casting. And so I think most people think all my work is slip cast, or I get that question a lot. And the actual fact is like none of it is slip cast. The handles are, that's about it. Because there's not enough soul in slip cast pieces for me, or just like flexibility. So I have a very rigid way I make things. They almost become like my canvases, after the first couple times, and I work out all the little nuances and details of a form, then they become these canvases that I can just put anything on. And that's really where I let myself like play and be free. I'll spend a lot of time researching and prototyping and getting this form and making it like as perfect, if that's a word I can use, as I think it can be. And then also with my like digital designing of my patterns, and really like having all these tools at my disposal. But then once I have all of that in front of me, then I am cutting up my stencils. I'm actually like, you know, breaking them up in different ways, and I'm not gridding out the piece, and I'm just like playing. And that gives me kind of this like excitement and this soul to the work, because I'm reacting to these tools that I've given myself, and I'm letting the decoration and the surface be where I give myself freedom to do whatever I want. And having kind of simple shapes, keeping it really geometric, that just works well for my brain. It's almost like this visual language I'm creating with each pattern. I'm super dyslexic, and I've struggled my whole life with communicating verbally. With writing, I couldn't read till I was like 7, which I was just so ashamed and embarrassed about, and had to be in special ed classes and all that. And I really understand shape and color better than I understand the English language, for sure. So, it's like giving myself that freedom to like break the rules that I've set for myself, and use a shape many different ways over and over and over again to see what the result can be. That's what's kind of exciting for me. And, I'll use a pattern for a while and then I'll get bored of it, because that's me, and I'll retire it, maybe forever, maybe for a while, and move on to something different. And, that's just how I work. I want things to be exciting for my audience, but first and foremost, I want them to be exciting for me, right? Like, I want to enjoy what I'm doing. And I tell my students that all the time. Just because you see all these processes and you take different workshops, or you learn a new, technology or a new material, doesn't mean it's going to resonate with you. And if you like don't feel that spark of joy in you, like, I don't think that thing's for you. You really need to like listen to yourself, because there's 1,000 ways to make ceramic work, more even, and you can get really overwhelmed and bogged down by that when you're trying to figure out what your way is. But you just need to keep going and trying things.
So a big part of your decoration is you mentioned stencils, and you use those, or you use a die cutter. Is that what it's called, a die cutter?
Yeah, a die cutter. Yep.
To create those. So can you talk about learning that digital interface, like on the computer, how you're thinking about the design, and then how that translates through those die cut stencils to the pots?
Yeah, so that was another thing that I did in grad school. Luckily they had a die cutter, and Linda had been using it mainly for like card making and scrapbooking. It's not her work, her work is so gestural. It's all hand painted. It's that tool is not right for her, but she was really interested in it and wrote a grant and got one for the program. And just like the soda kiln, for some reason, I was the only person interested in using it at the time. I think more people are using them now, for sure. But it was challenging, especially not having like a really big background in any kind of drawing or illustrating. That's never something I've been great at. I mean, I've painted and had drawing classes. And I mean, I was an undergrad art student. I had to do all that, but I've never been good at it. So, I do it in 2 ways now. I either hand draw shapes and then scan them in and manipulate them digitally, using the software that comes with the die cutter. Although I've had students also use Illustrator, because it all just reads vector files, SVG files. So you can design in a lot of different ways, or like Procreate, anything like that, and then just put it into the die cutting software and it will cut your pattern. Or I'll just grab like a shape, a really generic shape from the internet or from the software, and then manipulate it a lot, and kind of make a pattern and make it my own. And it is a huge learning curve. It's just, I was never really into digital art. I had never used a die cutter. The software that comes with it is easy to use, but it also looks like it's from 1990s Windows like format, and it's on my Mac, and my Mac crashes it all the time because it doesn't really like using it. So there was a lot of struggle with it, which is why I'm so excited about teaching it to people now, because I know people buy these machines and think they're going to be awesome and so easy to use. And then they're not. They're easy and they save you a lot of time once you are through that learning curve. Like once you've prepared your files and you can just press print and walk away. That's what's so great about it. Because in grad school, when I started doing all the paper stenciling, I was cutting it all by hand. And I would like go through a full week and be like, oh my God, I've done nothing but cut stencils this entire week in my studio hours. And I've made nothing and I have nothing to show for crit. Like this isn't sustainable. And paper stencils are one and done. It's not like they're reusable unless you're using something like Tyvek, which doesn't work great on something that's already in the round. And a lot of my pieces are thrown. So it's a lot of waste of time if you're hand cutting these things. But it has also informed like how I make patterns or how I design, just because I have figured out different functions in the software that you can like duplicate things or duplicate things nested. And especially now, I'm not using a full shape silhouette. I'm just using an outline. And that's just something that's come through like, oh, there's this waste product of this outline of the shape. Like, what could I do with this? I really hate waste. And I'm really cognizant of how wasteful ceramics is. Like it's just a very wasteful medium. Like the amount of energy we use, the hazardous materials, you could go on and on. So with my die cutting, like I save everything I cut, even if I have no idea how I'm going to use it. And then sometimes when I'm just feeling really just lacking inspiration, I'll just go through all of these like baggies of little shapes I have and remix them and see what I can come up with. And then that usually sparks like a whole new idea. And it's funny how that work can be even more exciting to me and other people than something that I've really planned out and theorized really well. So, I just, I don't throw anything away. I think that I get that from my dad. I'm definitely not a hoarder like he is, but I try not to be wasteful.
So on the outside of pots, using those templates is much easier than on the inside. But I was looking at your website, and there's these beautiful bowls that have like a little spout that comes off. Is it I don't know what their function is. Is it an egg bowl?
They're like a little egg mixing bowl. Yeah, because they're not quite big enough for anything else.
So how do you decorate the inside of that?
Oh, still with paper stencils. It's just, part of the process of applying a flat sheet of paper to something that's in the third dimension is that you're going to either have to dart, like cut and, kind of put back together, or cut up and kind of fashion how it would fit in there. I mean, I don't have it would probably help if I had a background in sewing or clothes making. But I don't. So I just make it up as I go along. And it is definitely very difficult to decorate the inside of something that's got a curve like a bowl. But I just cut little pieces of paper, or I also sometimes use the positive shapes like the Friscuits. That can be a lot easier because they're little and you can arrange them and then, paint underglaze over them. So I think I just like to make things harder for myself. I think that's really the answer. Everything in my life is just got to be as hard as humanly possible. Otherwise I get bored. So, I did that was work I was making last spring during the pandemic. And I was like, wow, I have all this extra time. Why don't I just decorate the inside too? Because I'm sitting here doing nothing otherwise, being sad about not being able to go see my friends. So I just let my excitement happen through my work instead. And it's just interesting how things come up like that. It's like very reactionary for me. And even if I don't know it at the time, like even if I'm not thinking about how I'm feeling is, influencing what I'm doing. But it always is. And it usually comes to me later, like, oh yeah, oh, that's why I was doing that. Okay.
Well, I feel like that's why writing an artist statement is so much easier like 6 months after the show's gone up, because all the ideas have settled.
Right. And also people have said their thoughts or their perspectives on it. And that's something that is exciting to me, and one of the reasons that I make abstract patterns and only use kind of shape and different theories with shapes and color is because I want to leave that work open. Like I want people to be able to derive their own meanings from their experiences. So like I posted this bowl the other day that had X's on it. To me, they're X's. And this woman I know in San Diego was like, I love that bowl with the crosses. And I think that's fantastic because that's what it is to her. That's great. I don't need to answer all the questions for people that are looking or using my work. So I think it's nice to leave an openness to it and something to be interpreted by the person that's collecting it or viewing it online or however they're interacting with it. I think that's really lovely. And also helps me with my control issues, letting
That's
go
right.
of that.
Well, one of the things you did when you were in Florida is that you had done a project where you sent people pots and then allowed them to use them in whatever the way they were going to, and then document that and then send that back, which seems like a wonderful experiment. It's almost like you're a scientist. Like, I'm going to give you some variables to serve food off of and then do whatever you want. So can you talk about that project and what you got out of that?
Yeah, that was really good to inform me that I needed to let go. So I was getting a lot of feedback and critique that I was being a kind of a dictator about how my work should be used. And ultimately, I know now, it doesn't matter what I've done design wise, it doesn't matter what it looks like. Once someone purchases a piece or I give someone a piece and they have it in their home, they're going to do whatever they want with it. Doesn't matter what my intention was. So I think all my colleagues were like gently trying to lead me there. Because for critique, I was creating these like eating experiences for all of us, and I was controlling every variable, and I wasn't leaving any space for them to even really be there, like truly be there as they should be with their own individualistic stamp that they're going to put on it. So I kind of came up with this idea, like, let me make these dishes that don't really have a super obvious function. They're kind of more sculptural or maybe a little bit harder to access. And I'll just give people some questions. I won't really give them too much information. I won't tell them how to use them. But it was people that weren't artists. That was really important, but maybe creative people, like people that did a lot with food or, people that just like took really great pictures or photos. So had some kind of creative vein in them, but definitely weren't visual artists and definitely weren't ceramic artists. That was really important because we think about things very differently than a person that is just using a plate, right? We have a completely different mindset towards that plate than someone that is like a chef or makes ceramic pots. So it was just really fascinating to see like them put their own spin on these things and break all the rules that I thought I had for them. And just taught me like it's more of a collaboration than I was comfortable with at the time. Because I'm making these objects, I'm putting them out into the world, and then people are doing whatever they want with them. That's really the takeaway that I got. So it was impossible to curate these experiences the way I wanted to without being too much, like I was taking all the fun out of it, really. Like that's what I was doing, and I didn't know it because I had so many ideals for my work. And so it was a good exercise in just letting go and letting them do what they want and seeing what came back to me. Ultimately, I think that's what I learned most. It didn't really like change how I make things per se. But, then it informed my thesis project and all of the other work I did. I had a really hard time in grad school because I had no conceptual art background. I had a BA. I didn't even have a BFA, which I was told I wouldn't get into grad school without a BFA. But when someone tells me I can't do something, then I'm really
you're going to make it happen.
Can do that. So I've had some horrible feedback and critiques in my early years, like from very notable names that I will not name. And I'm really grateful for that now, because it just gave me this drive, like, oh, I'll show you, I can do whatever I want. So, yeah, it definitely informed the way I make things. And I've never really seen my pots being in a gallery as like their happiest context. That's not why I make the things that I make. And I know they do exist in galleries, and I know I sell through galleries, but I make pots. I don't make vessels per se. And I do see a big difference in that, so I want them to be used. I want them to feel accessible. I want people to have their favorite Sunday coffee in my mug and not feel like it's so precious that they can't pick it up. So I think all of those experiences and letting people give me feedback, whether I felt comfortable about it or not, just kind of helped me be a stronger maker and articulate what I wanted to make, and that changed pretty quickly after grad school too.
Well, I wanted to wrap up talking about your experience working at Idlewild and what you're doing now in terms of organizing your art administration role there. So can you talk about how you came to Idlewild and then what you do now?
Yes, I love Idlewild so much. It is one of my favorite places in the whole world. I feel like I got grandfathered into Idlewild right before I left Southern California. I didn't even know it existed. Richard used to be the program coordinator for Hot Clay for the summer workshop programs until this year, actually. He retired. And part of his job was inviting artists and inviting assistants. So my last year in San Diego, right before I moved to Florida, he invited me to assist there. And I assisted Sunshine Cobb. I was her first assistant ever, because that was like right when she started doing workshops, kind of right before she got really big. There was only like 3 or 4 students in her workshop. And it was just a really unique experience because she didn't really know what to do with an assistant yet, which were her words. And mostly what I did that week is I went and got her cappuccinos from town because Idlewild coffee is not good. So that was my job basically for that week. That's not a real picture of what it is like to assist a workshop at all. And I figured that out later, because that was probably one of my first experiences assisting like a week-long workshop. And then I just fell in love with like the community. It's a craft school, but it's also an arts academy for high schoolers. It's a boarding school. And so it's got these 2 main programs where September through May, it's all high school kids that are working in not only visual art, that's actually their smallest kind of focus. It's much more of like a dance, theater, music school now, at least. And then they have the summer program. And so that's what I'm involved in. The summer program is actually the first program for the school. So that's been running since 1946. And it took about 40 years of just that happening. And then they started using the facility for a boarding arts high school. And it was the first boarding arts high school in the West. And what I think is really one of the only true craft schools on the West Coast, especially interdisciplinary. Like I know there's Pilchuck and some glass schools up in the Pacific Northwest and stuff, but so it's got this like lovely mix of like, it's just this creative space, and it's on Kauai land. So, there's this rich history of like Native arts there, which they really still honor. They have Native artists coming out to teach workshops in the summer. And, I just fell in love with the people and everything. And so every year I would ask to come back as an assistant. And I would write the program director a thank you card after I assisted every year because I wanted her to have a good taste in her mouth about me. And so I assisted 6 years in a row, I believe, which is kind of unusual. I just like wouldn't go away. And then the studio manager wanted to leave their position, and they invited me to do that, which I did in 2019. I assisted for 5 years. I taught 1 year. So Richard invited me to teach once I had kind of a reputation in the field. And then I came back as the studio manager. And then the pandemic hit. So we took a gap year last year. And now that Richard's retired, I'm actually the program coordinator for Hot Clay. So somehow I have stuck around. And now I'm running the Hot Clay program with the other people in the summer program that work there full time. And it's kind of been like my happy place, and I'm just really grateful that I'm going to be a part of its future and, getting to invite artists that I think are doing exciting things in the field, getting to invite young emerging talents to come assist them. I think it really fulfills that kind of goal I had as like wanting to be a college professor, but in a way that feels better for me because I have commitment issues and I can't imagine moving to like Indiana for a job and sacrificing everything that I would have to sacrifice to do that. So it's nice to have a place to kind of be a mentor and put on this programming. And, it's not my first art administration job, actually. I've had a few of them. I was working at Oregon College of Art and Craft in their fundraising, in their development department before it closed, helping them run the auction. And I don't know, it's just, I've always been really good at communication and organization and all those things that come naturally to me. So the more I do them, the more I'm actually like, well, I could maybe like do more of this and less art in some ways. I like giving opportunities to people. I think it's really fulfilling. Like when I took over in the winter, when Richard retired and I had to invite artists for this summer, I mean, don't get me wrong, it was really challenging because of COVID. There's like a ton of limitations and everything changed about the job. So it was definitely not what I had been trained by him to do, really. But when I got to send out those letters of invite and like invite people to come and teach and have a job, that was really thrilling. So I think that I hope I'm going to be there for a long time. I think I'm maybe one of the youngest people that has been in that coordinator position. So I'm really honored that they are trusting me with it.
And how can people find out about that program and the lineup?
Yeah, so they have a really great website. This summer, it's a really abbreviated program. So the website is idlewildarts.org, I believe. I should probably know that off the top of my head. This summer, we're only doing 2 weeks because of COVID, and there's only 2 classes each week. I'm hoping next summer we're going to go back to a normal schedule where it's a full month and 8 classes. And this is all for adults, so 19 plus. They do have teen ceramics classes that are taught by, more regional people, not like nationally known artists, as well as, the summer program is all encompassing. Like you can take a writing workshop, you can take native arts, pottery, you can take theater, dance, music. It really runs the gamut. So, and they're either a week or 2 weeks long now. I think none of them are longer than that. In its originality, it was like 8-week workshops, which would be awesome. But that was, in the 40s, 50s. So this summer for Hot Clay, we had to keep it pretty regional because they didn't want anyone flying, which makes sense. So I'm teaching because I'm going to be there. So, one less person on campus. And then Christina Arribes is teaching. She lives nearby. Jose Serra is teaching. And then Monica Van Dendel, who's a figure sculptor from the Bay Area. So I'm still really excited about the lineup, even though I couldn't invite nationally. I think it's a really strong lineup. And yeah, there are a few spots open in each workshop except for mine. I believe mine's sold out. And it runs usually June to July, but this week it's the last 2 weeks of June. So, and I can always send you like a link or something.
Sure. Yeah. And I'll put the link in the show notes so people can access it through there. Christina is amazing. We were at the Bray together, and you're going to really enjoy having her there, I think.
Yeah, I am a huge fan of hers, and she was on my list kind of tentatively for the future because I thought she was still in Montana, and I was like, oh, I can't invite her, and then I think I was just scrolling on Instagram and realized that she like lives 40 minutes away, and I was like, oh, okay, perfect. So I'm really excited. I'm teaching that week, so I'm a little disappointed that I'm not gonna be able to just like sit in her class and learn everything, but I'll get it somehow. Yeah, but it's a great place to come and learn. It's really picturesque. It's above the Palm Desert, so it's high desert. So you have this like lovely mix of desert and greenery and lots of hiking trails. Normally there's a pool on campus, although that will be drained this summer, I believe. It's just a wonderful place to come and be creative. And I can't say enough good things about it. And I think if anyone gets the chance to come take a workshop, you should, in whatever media, not just clay.
So to wrap up, can you leave your website and also social media so people can get in touch with you?
Sure. So my website is adrienneeliades.com. Just very simply my name.com, and all one word. And then my social media, mainly I do Instagram. I do not do Twitter, and I really don't look at my Facebook all that much. It just kind of exists out in the ether by itself. And so my handle for Instagram is @bugaboo_eyes, which maybe I would have picked a more serious name if I thought that I was actually going to be successful at being an artist one day. But that's what it is. So
where did the name come from?
So a bugaboo is kind of someone that is menacing or gives menacing looks. And I can literally not control my facial expressions. Like if you look at my face, you can tell how I feel. I had a Sunday school professor one time tell my mom that he thought that I was one of the most interesting kids in his Sunday school class because he could always read my emotions right on my face. So it's a little nod to how I cannot control my face and how, I accidentally give people kind of shit looks sometimes, which just part of me. So.
You can't control the stink eye. That's pretty good.
I can't. I really can't. I try, and it's not a good thing to have as a teacher, because it's like, you don't want to be putting that out into the world like immediately, but it's just me. I don't know. So I've never changed it. I've thought about changing it. I'm like, I should really put my name in there, something more recognizable, but it just feels like so much of a part of me that I'm just like, it's fine.
Well, thanks so much for taking the time to do this. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. This was awesome. Really good to talk to you.
I'd like to thank Adrienne for coming on the show. It was nice to spend some time with her and hear more about her work. As you heard at the end, Adrienne is the coordinator for the Idlewild Hot Clay Summer Program. If you'd like more information on that program, you can go to their website. That's idlewildarts.org. Also wanted to throw another plug in there for today's sponsor, the KC Clay Guild. They're getting ready for their annual T-Bowl National, which has a June 25th deadline. This is a great show and will be juried by Erica Iman this year. The exhibition has a $500 Best in Show award, as well as other purchase prizes and equipment awards. If you'd like to apply for that, you can go to kcclayguild.org/apply. I'll be back next week with another episode. Thank you guys for tuning in. If you'd like more information on the artists on the show, or if you'd like more information about the workshops and events that I'll be having in the next couple months, you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook under Carter Pottery. Another great way to support the show is to leave me a comment on iTunes. To do that, search Tales of a Red Clay Rambler under iTunes Podcasts, and you'll find a page that's linked to our show. Thank you guys for the support.